Have you ever really looked, really looked, at a postage stamp? Not just to stick it on an envelope, but to see it for what it truly is, a tiny engraved piece of history. Well, we're going to dive into one specific set of stamps from a century ago because it tells this incredible story about America, about technology, and about what makes a little scrap of paper, well, incredibly valuable.
All right, so let's set the scene. The year is 1922. For more than a decade, if you wanted to mail a letter in the US, you were pretty much stuck with stamps that had one of two faces on them, Washington or Franklin. They worked, sure, but they were kind of boring. Then, everything changed. The US Post Office decided it was time for a total refresh, and what they came up with was nothing short of a revolution in miniature. And this is what they came up with. It's known as the Fourth Bureau issue. Instead of just a couple of presidents, this brand new series of 23 stamps gave a panoramic view of America. This one right here, the 14-cent American Indian, is maybe one of the most iconic U.S. stamps ever made. It features Hollow Horn Bear, a Bruley Lakota leader, and was a completely radical departure from anything that came before. And it wasn't a one-off. The whole series just blew the doors open on what a stamp could be. For the very first time, an American woman, Martha Washington, was on a regular issue stamp. We got national symbols like the American buffalo, the spirit of the untamed West. And get this, the Golden Gate Strait, but decades before the famous bridge was even a blueprint. They even put the Lincoln Memorial on a stamp the very same year it was dedicated. This wasn't just postage anymore. It was a portrait of the entire nation.
So, the designs are fantastic, right? But in the world of collecting, what a stamp looks like is only half the story. The other half, the part that drives almost all of its value, is all about its physical condition. Let's dig into how this one single factor can mean a massive, massive difference in price.
So let's put this in real terms. Imagine you've got two complete sets of these 1922 stamps. Side by side, they look identical. Same designs, same paper, same age. So why on earth would a collector pay over $1,000 for one set and less than $50 for the other? The secret is all on the back.
Now this chart, this really breaks it all down. A used set, one that actually went through the mail, has been canceled, it's worth around $47. A hinged set, which just means it was mounted in an album with a little paper hinge on the back, jumps up to about $350. But a mint never hinged set, that's the holy grail for collectors, and the value just skyrockets to over $1,000.
So what in the world is mint never hinged? Well, it's the absolute gold standard. Think of it like a vintage comic book that's still in its original plastic sleeve, or an action figure that has never ever been taken out of the box. The stamp has all of its original gum on the back, completely untouched, just like it was the day it was printed. It's a perfect little time capsule.
But here's where it gets even cooler. If you thought condition was the whole story, think again, because beyond how a stamp was preserved, its rarity is also shaped by how it was made. The industrial manufacturing process back in the 1920s wasn't perfect, and for collectors, those little imperfections are like a treasure map.
You see, these stamps were made using a process called intaglio printing. This was a real art form. An artist would literally spend weeks hand engraving the design into a tiny steel plate. Then, that plate would be covered in ink, wiped clean, and pressed onto paper with so much force that the ink was pulled out of the grooves, creating this beautiful, crisp, raised image that you can actually feel with your finger.
But as the country grew, they needed stamps, and they needed them fast. So the Bureau of Engraving and Printing had to speed things up. And this, right here, is where the real secret for collectors comes in. They started using two different kinds of printing presses, and knowing how to tell them apart, well, that's the whole game.
So you've got two methods. On one hand, the original way, the flat plate press, which pressed flat sheets of paper, slow and steady. On the other, the new, faster tech, the rotary press, which used curved plates to print on huge continuous rolls of paper. Now here's the trick. Because the paper on the rotary press got stretched over that curve, the final printed design is just a tiny bit smaller. And I mean tiny, we're talking fractions of a millimeter. But for an expert, that tiny difference is everything. It's how you spot a common stamp from a rare one.
And believe me, once you know about that tiny difference, it unlocks a completely new level of collecting. This isn't just about getting one of each design anymore. For the real specialist, the hunt for these subtle manufacturing quirks is where the real fun begins.
As this quote says, the back and forth between these two printing methods created this incredibly complex puzzle of varieties. It's a puzzle that has kept collectors hooked for 100 years, trying to piece together the entire production story.
And just to make things a little more interesting, Stamps weren't only sold in flat sheets at the post office counter. For the new vending machines, they were made in long rolls, and these are called coil stamps. It's super easy to tell them apart. A normal sheet stamp has those little perforated edges on all four sides. But a coil stamp, it's only perforated on two opposite sides, right? So it could be easily torn from the roll.
Okay, so you've got the printing method, flat plate or rotary, you've got the format, sheet or coil, and when you combine those factors, a common everyday stamp can suddenly become a major rarity. That's the key takeaway here. A tiny, almost invisible variation can lead to a massive difference in value. Just look at this. The normal 2-cent George Washington stamp from this series, it's worth pennies, maybe a few dollars at most. But if you find the right one, the one printed on the faster rotary press, issued in a coil, with a tiny variation in how the number 2 is shaded, suddenly, boom, its value jumps to over $300 for one stamp. Now that's the thrill of the hunt.
So what does all this mean for someone who's just getting interested in this stuff? What's so amazing about this single series from 1922 is that it offers a complete collecting journey all by itself. There's a starting point here for absolutely everyone. You can literally choose your own adventure here. You can start as a basic collector, just having fun trying to find all 23 of those beautiful designs. Or maybe you want more of a challenge, so you aim for that perfect mint-never-hinged set. From there, you can become an advanced collector, hunting down both the flat plate and the rotary press versions of each stamp. And finally, you can go full specialist, searching for those incredibly rare coil stamps and tiny printing flaws. It's a hobby with endless layers to peel back.
You know, it really makes you think, doesn't it? These stamps were disposable, everyday objects, things people used and threw away without a second thought. But a century later, they become these detailed artifacts that tell a rich story about American identity, art, and technology. So I'll leave you with this question. What are the seemingly ordinary objects from our world today that will be unpacked and studied like this in another 100 years? What will tell our story?